Democrats in the US are rallying around Kamala Harris's choice of running mate in her bid to become the next US president. In a post on Instagram, she said she picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz because of his record of fighting for middle-class families. In just 2 weeks, he's gone from being little known outside his state to potentially the next Vice President of the United States. He has a record of promoting liberal policies such as protecting women's right to choose and championing climate issues. His profile with Democrats shot up after his description of Republicans Donald Trump and vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance as weird went viral. Predictably, the Democrats' political opponents went on the attack as soon as Walz's name was announced. J.D. Vance slammed the Minnesota governor as a San Francisco-style liberal who represents the radical left of the Democratic Party.
Look, Tim Walz's record is a joke. He's been one of the most far-left radicals in the entire United States government at any level. But I think that what Tim Walz's selection says is that Kamala Harris has bent the knee to the far left of her party, which is what she always does. So I think what it says is that Kamala Harris is running as a San Francisco liberal. She is governed as a San Francisco liberal, and she's chosen a running mate who will be a San Francisco-style liberal.
Well, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are due to appear for the first time as running mates at a rally in Philadelphia. Our correspondent Benjamin Alvarez Gruber is there. Welcome, Ben. So is Tim Walz the talk of the town? What are people there saying about him?
He is the talk of the town, and we could see with many supporters waiting in long lines. It was raining and they were waiting to get into this arena. As you can see behind me, the rally is underway. Many are waiting for the duo, for the ticket. He is now, many people are mentioning him, saying that he is the right pick. And if we look back, I mean, this process started over 2 weeks ago when President Biden decided to step down from the presidential race, endorsed Kamala Harris, and many were wondering who her running pick would be. Many thought that it could be either the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, is also expected to appear here in a couple of hours. Others said there will be a senator from Arizona, Senator Kelly, two swing states that are very important for Democrats. But what we've heard from the campaign from Kamala Harris is that they connected not just on a personal level, but that she has a lot of respect for the work that he has achieved during his 2 terms. He's now in his 2nd term as governor of Minnesota, and many of the policies, as you mentioned, are policies that the Harris campaign wants to see on a national level. We have paid leave, we have access to reproductive health, and many of the things that they also would like to introduce if they make it to the White House. So in this video that was posted, this phone call between Vice President Kamala Harris and VP pick, she said, "You know this country." And if we look at Governor Walz, what he has achieved too, that he joined politics quite late after being a teacher. He was in China, he speaks Chinese, he was a football coach, and he was also part that's quite interesting too. He kind of helped to form a LGBTQ alliance in a high school. So many things coming out now of a man who knows the political arena quite well. And as you mentioned, this MSNBC interview that went viral when he spoke about this weird ticket of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, that might also be something that he might say today again here in Philadelphia.
OK, so a man with a rounded CV, if I can put it that way. But you mentioned Josh Shapiro and Mark Kelly, the 2 bigger names who'd been mentioned. So how did Tim Walz manage to eclipse them?
So they thought it might be someone. Many people were wondering, why not Shapiro, why not Kelly? And we know that this very long process, that there were interviews that happened on Friday, on Saturday, on Sunday. There are so many people involved here. What the campaign, the Harris campaign, is hoping is that he will get more people from other states, rural votes, also to vote for this ticket. And of course, there need to be some chemistry. They will be working together for many months now. It's a very tight schedule that they have in many of the swing states. In the next couple of days, it will traveling around the country. But it's that respect that Kamala Harris mentioned that her team has for the job that Governor Walz has achieved in Minnesota, and also his biography that was mentioned a lot and over by the Harris campaign. Of course, expectation here in the arena is growing. Many are anxiously waiting for the duo to appear on stage.
So just before you came on, we heard J.D. Vance trash talking Tim Walz. And how else are Republicans responding to this pick?
So there was a press release quite quickly that was sent out once this news broke, saying that this shows how radical Kamala Harris is. He attacked both of them immediately. J.D. Vance was here in Philadelphia only a couple of hours ago. It will be interesting to see the first debate, what the strategy will actually be. But as I said, it was this MSNBC interview where Governor Walz actually mentioned this word weird that he's been using over and over, and also by the campaign. The Democrats have actually coined the word weird to mention the Republican ticket. So it's no wonder that they would attack him directly. But we're, of course, anxiously waiting to see if he will refer to J.D. Vance, if he will refer to Donald Trump. And just to see here behind me, you can see some expectation. There are many lights that were sent out here in the arena, so the expectation is growing for both of them to appear on stage. The first joint appearance by Kamala Harris and her vice president pick.
And a quick word then about the packed schedule they have coming up in this week, Ben.
So there will be in several of the swing states. There will be in Nevada. There will also be in Wisconsin. There's, of course, also a very important state. So they will be traveling together. And this phone call happened today. So yesterday, there was still no decision. Kamala Harris was in the Situation Room with Joe Biden talking about developments in the Middle East. And only today they knew they would work together. And he said it would be an honor to work with you. So we'll be seeing a lot from the couple in the next couple of days as they try to, of course, attract more voters and stay with this momentum that Kamala Harris is actually seeing right now.
Thanks for that, Ben. DW correspondent Benjamin Alvarez Gruber in Philadelphia. Dr. Karen Sebold is an assistant professor of political science at the University of Arkansas. Welcome to DW, Doctor. Was your money on Tim Walz to be Harris's VP pick?
He was not my first prediction, given that most of the observers and pundits were pushing for Shapiro, the governor out of Pennsylvania. I think it is a surprise for most of us here in the States.
Why do you think he got it over them?
You know, I think it came down to the feeling that she had about him and the way she connected with him when she interviewed with him and met with him over the last couple of weeks. But also, I think he brings demographics, he brings geography, as well as his own personal biography to the ticket and balances it out in a way that will help her with those undecided voters, especially in the battleground states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
Right. And these are you talked about the demographics and the geography there. OK, so you've talked us through the geography. Tell us about the demographics.
Well, so, you know, being that he has a Midwestern background, a Midwestern kind of philosophy and approach to life, he will help with those voters that are in the Midwest that maybe don't relate to Kamala Harris, who is a coastal liberal and has somewhat of an elite background. He does not. He is going to be one of the first candidates on a national ticket that does not have an elite education, is not a lawyer, and really comes from this kind of working class background. He worked as a school teacher, a high school football coach, and served in the National Guard for over 20 years.
So that's a story that appeals to voters. You say he's not a coastal liberal, but he's got liberal written through him like rock. I look at his record in the state legislature, an ambitious agenda of liberal policies, free college tuition for low-income students, legal recreational marijuana, protections for transgender people. These are bullseyes for Republican accusations of a super woke, radical, extreme left-wing agenda, aren't they?
It's absolutely, and they are going to try to paint him as part of that kind of Biden-Harris liberal agenda, progressivism on high speed. And they will be right to a certain degree, but they can't ignore that he also has these positions and these policies that have supported working class families and children, which are very populist in nature and balance out some of his progressive stances toward the LGBT community, the legalization of marijuana, as well as abortion rights. So he is a mixed bag in terms of those policies. And the Harris campaign is going to have to work to educate voters about him because we don't really know that much about him. And so, the Trump campaign will rush to paint a picture of him as someone that's out of touch with society. In fact, they've already started to run ads that paint him as a progressive that's dangerous for society.
I wanted to touch on gun safety as well, because Governor Walz has enacted a massive bill this year that includes universal background checks and so-called red flag laws that allow police to temporarily confiscate firearms from dangerous people. This is really taking the fight to the Republicans or just giving them targets to aim at.
Certainly it is, and most liberals are going to have similar stances because that is where the Democratic Party is. They do support regulating the Second Amendment to a degree with things like background checks. So that is something that the Trump campaign will certainly want to hit him on. They will want to continue to paint him as someone that's dangerous and will take away your rights. But they're going to have to push. They're going to get a little pushback from Walz because he is an avid hunter. And this is not something that is just for show. He actually has, many pictures and much evidence to prove that this is not something that is just a picture for him. He really does support that. But since he's been governor, he's softened on those rights a little bit, as executives will do in a liberal state. So he's going to have to fight to overcome that messaging from the Trump campaign.
And Republican nominee J.D. Vance has said that he will debate Tim Walz once he's officially the nominee. How do you think these two will stack up against each other head to head?
I think it's going to be interesting because they certainly contrast one another in terms of how they talk about policies and their kind of positioning toward policies, obviously. But they have similarities, too, in that they do come from the Midwest. They do kind of have a working class background, but they diverge in that J.D. did go to a liberal school. He's an elitist in terms of his education. He's a lawyer. And Walz does not have that similar background as J.D., but they are going to come at each other hard because these are two candidates that really we don't know that much about. And so they're going to be working to paint one another as the opposite of what undecided voters want or what those voters in those battleground states want. So it'll be interesting to see because we don't know that much about these two candidates as we have about maybe some of the other previous vice presidential choices in the past.
The role of vice president was once famously described as not being worth a bucket of spit. How important is this choice beyond the electoral college votes that they bring to the ticket?
Well, I think this may not be the case this time around because we're dealing with a different type of process, an unprecedented process in that, you had a major candidate step down and now as vice president has been delegated the role of candidate. And so we don't know much about her either. And her vice presidential choice tells us a little bit about her and where she wants to the party to be and where she wants to the areas of the party she wants to represent. So in that respect, I think this vice presidential choice is actually more helpful than those ones in the past that have gone through the traditional processes because we're still trying to define Kamala. So this may help her. If it is a turnoff to the undecided voters in those battleground states, then it could hurt her. So I think it nonetheless will have more impact than what you previously have seen.
Fascinating analysis, and we thank you for it. Dr. Karen Sebold from the University of Arkansas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Peter Mathews is a political scientist at Cypress College in California. He joins us from Long Beach. Welcome back to DW. What do you think Tim Walz's Midwestern background brings to this Democratic ticket?
Quite a bit, actually. And I was saying yesterday when I was on your show that this is a down-to-earth Midwesterner who's a progressive populist, which means that he portrayed himself as being for the common person. And his personal characteristics are very much that. He was very folksy. He could communicate to a small town person or to a small city person. He grew up in a small town. And Tim Walz is going to make add a lot of strength to this campaign. I'd like to read off real quickly some of the things he did when he was in office that reflects this small town progressive populist image. Provided universal free school meals for students, protected reproductive freedom by codifying abortion choice, strengthening voting rights, laying the groundwork to get Minnesota to 100% clean electricity by 2040, cutting taxes for the middle class, expanding paid leave for Minnesota voters, and
Okay.
ending book bans based on ideology. Those are some of the things he accomplished, but I think that reflects his political position, basically.
And his stock rose when he started describing Donald Trump and J.D. Vance as weird. How is this approach helping the Kamala Harris campaign?
Well, it's an interesting word, weird. It's been around for decades. You know, when I was a kid in Michigan, I lived in Michigan, the Midwest myself, that word was used to show that something is outside the norm and kind of strange and a little bit creepy and dangerous. So when you use the word weird, and it portrays Trump and Vance that way, it brings to mind some of the positions that they've taken that are just horrendous, that a lot of American people do not agree with. And that portrays them as the outsider, as the other party, which has been taken over by these folks, this faction, the Republican Party, which is a traditional party, but it's been taken over by Trump and Vance, and comes up with very strange kinds of policies that could hurt people, including the Project 2025 plan that they have put forth, which people are very leery of.
OK, so you laid out a list of the governor's achievements there in Minnesota. Many of the points on that list of his achievements might be talking points that the Republicans can attack Walz on, portraying him as a radical on climate or on guns, for instance. How do you see Republicans attacking Tim Walz?
They will try to do that, absolutely. But what he will do is come back with a common sense response and say, children want to be safe in school. I did that. I made very strict gun control and regulation. We want to have universal health care. I support that. Minnesotans and Americans want to be able to go to a doctor when they're sick and not go broke. Those kinds of issues, he'll come right back and say, these are common sense issues that Americans want. And by the way, in many of those issues, the majority of Americans do support them. On a few of them, maybe there may be some concern about it. And I don't think that Vance and Trump will have as great a success as attacking him that way as an extremist when his issues are quite mainstream, actually. We'll have to wait and see how that goes, though, of course, in the campaign.
J.D. Vance has said that he will debate Tim Walz once he's officially the nominee. How do you think that the two VP candidates stack up against each other?
I would say like night and day, pretty much. If you look at what J.D. Vance has brought to the Republican ticket, he's brought it down, actually, in terms of his popularity. Now President Trump, his numbers are below Vice President Harris. He was way ahead when Biden was there. He was way ahead at the beginning of Harris's campaign. Now, within 2 weeks, he's sunk by 7 points, a 7-point turnaround, where now Vice President Harris and her ticket are 4 points ahead of the Vance-Trump ticket. So J.D. Vance has been a problem for the campaign, and they're kind of, some people are talking about possibly replacing him, which would be very difficult to do. They probably won't do it, but it's really hurting the ticket because of Vance's extreme positions. For example, we talked about childless cat women, saying Democratic Party is led by those folks. That is a terrible attack on single people or people who are sometimes fathers who do not have their own children but adopted them. This is very important that Americans believe in a blended families, in the new way of thinking, and this is what J.D. Vance is doing, putting back to a backward condition that many people feel. And that's what Walz and Harris will attack them on.
OK, thanks for joining us. Political scientist Peter Mathews in Long Beach, California.
My pleasure. Thank you.